Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell, and we are creativity coaches who help people fear less, create more, and bring their creative visions to life.
If you are an OG member of the Sparkfile community, welcome back, Sparkler.
If you're joining us for the first time, hey, welcome, friend.
Know that just by listening to this podcast, you are joining a warm and wonderful clan of creatives.
You know, it really is true.
It really is true.
It really is true.
These are true facts we state.
You may also be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File?
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all of your inspirations and fascinations.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know, if you're not careful, your campfire of creativity can flicker out.
But do not despair. We are collecting kindling in the form of fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark creativity and pique curiosity to light a fire under our collective asses to make something like this podcast.
Or an approach to talking about death that gives us more life.
Oh, I love it. Every episode, we're going to reach into our Spark Files and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
That means we have more sparks than we can possibly use in this lifetime.
So if something lights you up, we encourage you to please, for the love of God, take that thing and make something out of it.
Without further ado, let's open up
The Spark File.
You know, Laura, I was
babe.
getting ready today, like just getting ready for the day.
Yes.
And I was just like, man, we do these episodes of the podcast and there's so many good ideas that get thrown around and so many things that if we chose to, we could take deeper dives on and really be activated by. And I was kind of bummed because I was like, I don't have enough time in my life. I will not have enough days in this lifetime to get to all these things. And I was like, that's why you say that thing in the podcast intro, dum-dum, because we have more sparks than we can possibly use in this lifetime. You know, it's not a homework assignment. You don't have to do all the things. You just have to let them wash over you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And some will move you into action and some will, sometimes I'll hear like an amazing thing that like lights me up. It's a spark. And I'm like, oh, that would be so great as a this, that, or the other thing. And then I'm like, but it's not for me. It's for someone else. That little thing is going to flitter on to the next person and they're going to grab it and run with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to confess something that I don't know if I should confess, but I'm doing it anyway. Some of like the things that sparked me the most, deeply sparked by these things, are big, big topics. I've not even broached them for the podcast because I'm just like, every time I think about this A, B, or C, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so huge. I need a way into it that's going to be just, a little 45-minute, 50-minute conversation.
Yes.
But it's so big and it's almost like so important to me that I wouldn't want to do it halfway. I don't want to half-ass it. And I'm not saying we're going to half-ass these, but sometimes we have more time than others. And so usually I'm like, oh no, I don't have time to write that big old juicy spark right now.
I think you share that sentiment with a lot of people who are like, I have a spark or source material. And that could be source material. It could be something you optioned. It could be something that happened to you in your life. And you're like, this is important to me and I want to do it justice. And so I don't have the wherewithal or the time or whatever to do it justice now. So I'm just going to.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to say where it becomes problematic is when our perfectionism chimes in, because then it's like, oh, I don't think I could do this perfectly and exactly the way I envisioned doing it in my head. I'm not going to have, and so I don't do it at all. And I'm just like, all right, I'm not sure that's the answer, Laura. I'm saying this to myself, Laura. The answer may be, how do you take a bite of this and release all attachment to it being perfect, put enough of it out there that it may spark someone else, that they run with it and create the most perfect thing ever in regard to it. Because if I just hold on to it because I don't think I could write the perfect spark or the perfect episode, when ironically there are other episodes I'm like, well, this isn't perfect. I don't care. I'm doing it. We're going to have a good time talking about it. And we run with it. And I'm just like, interesting, because I don't care as deeply about that as I do these ones that are sitting on a shelf that are like, oh, these are precious, precious, precious sparks.
Yeah. But I will say, just counterpoint. I remember I was taking this class and there was this sentiment shared about if there's something that you're like, I don't think I'm quite ready for that yet. Just take a leap, take a swing, just like start it now. It's a little bit like that Goethe.
Yeah.
Whatever you do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius and power and magic in it. And I was like, I'm going to start it. And I knew intuitively, I was like, you really aren't quite ready for this. Like the Avengers haven't completely assembled inside of you to.
That's right.
And it wasn't perfectionism based. It was like, it wasn't a fear. It was an intuition. And I started it and it was a little bit of a misstart because I was just like, you're not quite there yet. So I think there's a fine distinction in what we're talking about here, which is if the holdup is around perfectionism, I think that's interesting to look at. If it's an intuition about like, I need to marshal my forces or there's something more I want to learn, that's tricky too. I need another course, the drag queen introduced to us by Wheels.
Exactly. It's really hard to parse that, but it's worthy work, like really looking at that.
Agreed.
And asking, all right, if I'm not ready to write the ultimate life-changing, transformative piece based on this spark, maybe I'm just ready to share 45 minutes of conversation about this spark to share with the world. Like it's two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to remember that of like, right. This is just us talking for 45 minutes, sharing it with someone else. So they might be like, guess what? I'm ready to take that baton and run with it. And I'll take it all the way home. Great. That's what this podcast is about.
In the spirit of that, I feel like I have one of these for you today.
Oh, I'm excited.
This is a big topic. And there's part of me preparing for this today that I was like, oh, I wish these 2 or 3 things could happen before I do this spark so I can report back on it. I wish I was a little more ready or I had more experience with this before I talk about it. Because it is a big topic, but I'm not going to pump the brakes.
Look at you.
I'm going to jump in.
I'm proud of you. I'm excited and I can't wait to hear it.
All right. And then maybe when I have more You'll see when I get into it. But once we've had more experience with it, you can circle back and I'll report back later on it. Okay.
Okay.
But today we're going to talk about death.
Okay.
We're going to talk about death. Cams, this is a subject I lean straight into.
You do.
I think it's healthy to think about death, and I think it's healthy to talk about death. And I really do believe that getting comfortable talking about death and mortality is a key to living well, including unlocking our creativity and our self-expression. So, a story I've told on this podcast before, in my first acting class in college, I had this drama teacher who had us do this exercise where all of us acting students were zipping around the acting studio like a bunch of little hummingbirds. And then the teacher from time to time would say, pause. And we'd all stop. We'd hover wherever we were. And our teacher would say, consider this. Unpause, and we'd all like frenetic little molecules bouncing around and be like, pause, consider that. So one of the things our teacher asked us to consider in the pause, he said, the greatest artists are those who are willing to contemplate their own mortality. Unpause. And it just like,
whoa,
it cut through, it stays with me decades later. And I think the older I get and the more that I live and create, the more I understand what that teacher was getting at when we were doing that. I think that if you are brave or comfortable enough to think about and talk about death, it makes you more brave and comfortable to be self-expressed about so many other dimensions of the human experience.
I concur. And I have to say, you've helped me a great deal, like gain comfort in this area. I realize I, like many, many other people, having been brought up in different ways, but for me, it was, in a narcissistic home, but that the magical thinking aspect of it and understanding our minds better, if you don't ever address that about yourself, it's difficult to talk about death because in the magical thinking world where you believe your thoughts can instantly create something. So a negative thought can create a negative outcome. Like I thought, I wish that person would die. And then they die and you're like, I did that. Right.
Right.
Or if you think about yourself dying, are you bringing about this outcome faster than it would have?
Right.
So you sort of avoid those types of topics.
Right.
Right. But years of therapy later and a friendship with Susan Blackwell. And I'm happy to say.
Who will not stop talking about
Will
death.
not stop. But also the idea of being able to hold multiple truths at one time. I said to Wes not long ago, it was the strangest thing. I was like, I just want the record to state. And he was like, oh God, what is it? And I was like, I just want the record to state, like, if I died tomorrow, I have already lived a really incredible life that I feel so grateful for and so excited by. I just want you to know that. Now, at the same time, I'd like to live another 30 years or 40 years with West Day and have more adventures and more fun. I'm not saying that I'm done or that there isn't more that I want to do, but having learned that these two things can coexist in my mind, was an essential part of being able to talk about death.
And you're not sealing your fate by saying something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that you said that. And I love that you feel that way. Laura, something I've told you, listeners, I'm telling you for the first time. I was recently home visiting my family and I was alone in the living room with my father, who is in his 80s. And this popped out of his mouth. He said something along the lines of, I was just like, how are you doing? And he said, I don't know how long I have or how I'll go, but I do know that I don't have that much time and I don't know how I'll go, but I know I'm supposed to be using this time that I have, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to be doing with it. And in that moment, I was a little bit stunned and I said something like, I think you're doing it, Dad. You're spending time with people you love, people who love you. I think this is it. I think this is it. You're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to admit, I was taken by surprise, but the answer felt a little incomplete. And it's taken me some time to wrap my mind around this sort of conundrum that he posed. And I was also like, oh no, I already ask myself this question all the time now, and not in a good way. So what I mean by that is often during the course of an average day, I'll think, is this what I should be doing with my time? Is this the best way to use my time? And it's not a peaceful thing. It's more like a rumination
Mm-hmm.
that especially prevents me from enjoying resting. But I recognized something in my dad's quandary that made me think, number one, I come by this line of thinking honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I want to get a handle on this now. So when I'm, God willing, in my 80s, I'm not tormenting myself by asking, is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my time? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my time?
It's Suze, and I don't want to jump your spark if you're going to get into this, but I'm curious, do you think that that question is related to the idea of knowing your purpose in life?
No, for me, it's usually like when I'm trying to rest. It's my brain tormenting me when I'm trying to rest. And I'm like,
Not doing this right.
you're not doing this right, essentially. But I recognize my dad cast forward decades. I recognized in this person, my father,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, I ask myself the same question in a time when, like, really, Dad, it's okay to read and visit with people, and there's nothing that you have to be doing. You can just be doing this and
Enjoy the passage of time.
enjoying the passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I it helps to have a clear understanding of my purpose, which I do. It's harder for me to apply that to times when it's just sort of like, well, it's interesting just sitting here right now. I'm like, you actually could apply your purpose, Susan, to times when you want to rest as well, to be free to rest.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And to know that that rest is essential to being able to fulfill your purpose.
Well done. This has been another episode of the
That's
Spark Bell Podcast.
it.
Just
Here we
kidding.
go.
Back to my dad and my dad's quandary and my quandary
Yeah.
about how to respond to his wondering about how best to be spending this time when he's in his 80s. So something that has been helping me is a book by Michael Hebb called Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner.
Whew. That first time you mentioned that title to me, I was like, oh, good. Okay.
Let's talk about death over dinner.
dinner.
Because you were like, oh no, I'm going to go to a death dinner party, aren't I? Said Laura Camion knowingly.
Hey.
Yeah.
But you know what? I would do that now, but I wouldn't have, like, say, I don't know, 5-8 years ago. No, I wouldn't have.
I think it's definitely in the cards for you by the end of this spark. I think you're going to be, you're going to be ready to rock. So this book, Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner by Michael Hebb, which I have to say, I think is a really beautifully researched and crafted book. Michael Hebb makes the case for the many reasons why talking about death is extremely important. And then he provides us with an approach for when, where, and how to talk about death, the invitation, the setting, the prompts to bring conversation around this topic to life. So I'd like to start with why. Why talk about death? Now, as you know, with me, Michael was preaching to the choir. But I know that entering into this conversation isn't everyone's first choice. For many people, they are very clear why they don't want to talk about death. It is sad, it's scary, it might be anxiety inducing. Maybe they don't want to consider what it might feel like to lose someone or something they care about, like a beloved partner or pet. Maybe it's terrifying to think about how they might die. Maybe we've watched a parent suffer with a disease that we may inherit. So it's like very real and very scary.
And the anxiety of someone having to look through my stuff and figure out where shit is.
Yes, yes.
I'm embarrassed. I'm not great at organizing these files.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh God, when I'm dead, will I feel embarrassment about that? I don't know.
Probably not. I'm guessing not, but you may believe otherwise. I think sometimes we're scared because we can't know for sure what's on the other side of our inevitable deaths. We were talking about this with our friend and Sparkfile alum, Celia Keenan Bolger, a few days ago.
Hi, Celia.
Hi, Celia. I realized in real time in that conversation that two facts: we know that we will die, and we have no idea what happens to us when we die. The absolute knowing and the absolute not knowing are like these twin truths. They are like two sides of the same coin back to back.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty scary roller coaster ride for anyone to contemplate, let alone knowing, like if you're in your 80s or you have a terminal diagnosis, which we all do, like knowing you're about to cruise into that. Like, I know I'm going to die. I don't know how exactly it's going to happen, and I don't know what's on the other side. It's big.
And then contemplate this. I think as humans, that's the gift that separates us from other animals, because to our knowledge, they don't sit around contemplating their own demise.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
have that ability.
We do.
Hey.
We do. We
Fun.
do.
Yeah.
This podcast is the funnest. So those are some reasons, just a few of the greatest hits of why we don't want to talk about death. Now, I want to talk about why talking about death is good, healthy, and important.
Yes, tell us.
Why? Why do we want to talk about death?
Why?
Number one, our health. According to Michael Hebb, this fucking blew my butt off. According to Michael Hebb, a repressed conversation can occupy the same space in the psyche as a secret.
Whoa, say that again.
A repressed conversation, like one about death, can occupy the same space in the psyche as a secret. He goes on. A recent study from the National Institute of Health confirms that every time you think about a deeply held secret, stress hormones such as cortisol can surge, impacting your memory, blood pressure, and metabolism. The effects of chronic exposure to elevated levels of cortisol include many maladies we suffer today, from high blood pressure to anxiety. I had never heard that put so clearly, but it totally articulates something I suspected, that repressed conversations and secrets that we keep add to stress levels, which really can diminish our health.
It's like that closed door in your brain that you walk by and you're like, don't open that, you know?
Yeah.
But it just is a stress every time you even contemplate like what's behind there.
Yeah. And that stress can really be bad for our health. Another reason to talk about death: so we can get what we want. Again, Michael Hebb writes, in his recent testimony to Congress, Dr. Atul Gawande, who we love and we've discussed on this podcast, made a case for doctors asking patients about their priorities of care as their end draws near. And this is Dr. Gawande. These are his words. The most effective and important way to learn these priorities is to ask people about them. The overwhelming majority of the time, however, we don't ask, whether as clinicians or as family members. When we don't ask, the care and treatment we provide usually fall out of alignment with people's priorities, and the result is suffering. But when we do ask and work to align our care with their priorities, the results are extraordinary.
Wow.
So by saying what we want, you can get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And per Michael Hebb, it's not just doctors and clinicians who fail to have conversations about what people want for their end of life. It's families too. And when we do ask, it's generally not until close to the very end. According to Michael Hebb, a number of studies have demonstrated that when people with serious illness have discussed their goals and wishes for their care with their clinician, the outcome is far better. They suffer less, they are more physically capable, and they are better able for a longer period to interact with others. Their family members were also markedly less likely to experience depression. They enroll in hospice sooner, but they do not die sooner. On average, in fact, they live longer.
The ones who talk about it.
The ones who talk about death.
I feel like I have some regrets about, it hasn't happened in a long time, but sometimes when their death is imminent and they want to talk about it, families can like hush them, basically.
Yes.
Like, oh, Dad, don't talk, don't talk like that. Don't talk like that.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking like about my dad, and who's wanted to talk to us. And I think I've gotten better, thankfully, because he will be like, I just want you to know, full disclosure, my dad has Parkinson's and a pacemaker and multiple myeloma and has been, dealing with these things for some time. And he has wanted on occasion to talk about his death.
Yeah.
And I have that immediate urge of like, oh, Dad, but you got lots of time in front, and then I stop myself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and what do you been thinking about, Dad? And how does that make you feel? And what do you want to say about that? I just think about how many times people have been hushed because we can't handle the discomfort. And I'm like, my God, they're the one who's going through it.
Yeah.
Why can't, well, the least we could do is show up for the conversation.
Is hang. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like, Laura, based on what you just said, do you feel like now you're like hanging in there and letting your dad steer it more?
Yes. Yes. And I try to
good.
ask questions, and I try to just listen, just be there, as he wants. He has had a thing for a while now where he's really wanted it to sink in to us kids, all of us kids, and we're not really kids anymore, but he'll just be like, I'm not going to get better.
Yeah.
This is not a thing where it's like they're curing me and I'm going to get better. And I'm like, I know, Dad, I know. And how do you feel about that? And like, it's just been really important for him to know, because I think a lot of people, again, because of the discomfort, sort of treat it that way of like, well, tomorrow you'll feel better. And he's like, I'm not, if I have a good day, that's the best I'm going to feel. Like, he's just like, I think it's important for him to embrace that too, to be like, this is what it is and is what it will be.
Yeah. To be able to be with that and not negate it or shush it is, it requires that we all reckon, like we all say, yeah.
You're really good at it, Suze. I feel like I've learned so much from you. You're just really, really good at it. You can hang with a difficult conversation.
I think so. It depends maybe on the flavor of difficult conversation, but
sure.
Yeah, I can stay in even through sadness, or I can hang in.
I appreciate that about you.
I'm always trying to get better at it though, as evidenced by this very spark. Another reason to talk about death is financial. Again, Michael Hebb writes, at the most tangible level, our reluctance to have this conversation is costing us money every single day. A study from this book is so well researched.
Wow.
Laura. A study from the Mount Sinai School of Medicine found that 43% of Medicare recipients spend more than their total assets out of pocket on end-of-life care. Medical care is the number one factor in U.S. bankruptcies, with end-of-life care expenses, particularly hospital expenses, leading the charge. And although approximately 80% of Americans want to die at home, this makes me so sad, only 20% of them do.
Oh.
More than half of us are not getting what we want or what we're entitled to, and we're paying dearly for it. People are bankrupting their families, and for little good reason. Most of them don't even want expensive, extreme, life-prolonging measures, but they haven't talked to their families about their preferences, and no one has asked.
Ugh.
But wait, there's more. Michael Hebb writes further, the medical sphere is not the only place where we're losing money. When people don't talk honestly about their memory loss, for instance, they are not only more vulnerable to making serious financial mistakes, but are also more likely to be taken advantage of. Because financial exploitation cases are underreported, in part because of embarrassment, it's difficult to put a precise number on it, but there may be as many as 5 million elderly victims of financial exploitation a year in the United States. And then there's the cost that comes with death itself. Countless grieving family members enter funeral homes, and when plans haven't been discussed in advance, making decisions about coffins and burial based on funeral directors upselling them. In the fog of grief, they spend money their family doesn't necessarily have to fulfill a sense of duty that the deceased would never have wanted from them. And again, if we're not clear about what we want, if we don't express our wishes can't be honored.
Wow.
So I just thank you, Michael Hebb, for your beautiful writing. I just read a lot of it right here on this podcast. And when it's difficult to talk about death, sandwiched with it's difficult and taboo to talk about money, it is a recipe for, all sorts of mayhem.
It really is. And I keep thinking about the wishes that you mentioned. If you don't talk about money, you can't fulfill their wishes. But also, if you don't talk about money, honestly, like a person who's like, well, I want, a silk lined coffin and I want blah, 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 blah. But if you can talk openly and say, well, now, grandma, the impact of that would be this on the family.
There might be some credit card debt in the family.
Exactly. And to that, the person, again, if you're speaking openly, the person might be like, oh my gosh, no, I don't want that. I don't want it that bad. I don't want you to go into debt for it. Put me in a cedar coffin, call it a day.
I don't know that I've ever heard, in all honesty, and I haven't talked with a million people about this, but I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, I want a silk lined mahogany coffin with gold detailing. Like, I've never heard that. I don't know that people want that.
But we don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
We should talk to more people.
Yeah. I literally know my dad and stepmom's wishes, and I know Wes's.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because those are people that you may be called upon to execute those wishes.
And they all want mahogany caskets.
Gold detailing.
Just kidding. Nobody wants with you. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But but to your point, if we don't talk about it, we're making assumptions.
That's right. And those could be very, not just expensive, but they could also be, as Michael Hebb is saying, not in alignment with what people might have wanted had we simply had the conversation.
Exactly. Or what they might have been fine with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most important reasons to talk about death is because it stands to bring us closer to each other and to ourselves. Hebb writes, we spend so much time, energy, and money focused on self-improvement. We are constantly seeking to be better, to do life better. We go to therapy and meditation courses. We go on diets, sign up for CrossFit, and make improvements to our spending. We are a culture obsessed with transformation, and yet we fail to recognize that all transformation includes death and rebirth. And it's so interesting that this is a way that we can really know ourselves and really come at transformation from one of the most significant transformations in our lives, right alongside birth. It really has the potential to unlock stuff. He makes a really great point in this book, which is, as a culture, we're a little messed up about death.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, it's all around us and we flock to it with listening to true crime and just morbid fascinations with things like traffic accidents. But when it comes to talking about it with one another, honestly and openly, not so much.
I find that to be so ironic because in America, we are a country built largely on religions. I mean, it's been sown throughout. And I think a large part of organized religion is to help us feel better about death. It is there to help us feel better about what's beyond.
I could not agree with you more. It's to answer a question, an unanswerable question.
Yes, exactly.
And to say, with some measure of certainty, here's an answer to an unanswerable question. Doesn't that feel better?
Yes. And to help to guide you to live your life a certain way while you're here.
Right.
So that you may reap rewards on the other side. And I just find it ironic that despite all of that, culturally, we still have a hard time talking about death.
Yeah.
When that entire framework exists for people to hopefully feel better about talking about death, and still no go.
He writes really honestly in his book about how his family just stopped talking when his father died.
Oh.
And he writes this passage, because my family wasn't talking about what was most on our minds, staying away from each other was the safest and healthiest thing we can do. We didn't talk about my dad, and as a result, we didn't talk much at all. Being unable to talk about my grief or loss with my peers left me feeling depressed, confused, and terribly alone. And I was like, I don't think Michael Hebb is alone in that. I think other people experience some version of that. because we've made a tacit agreement that we're not going to talk about X, we're not talking at all. And it's back to that piece about keeping a secret or having like an avoided conversation. It's the source of so much stress, which again can really diminish our health.
Wow.
Michael Hebb writes this: from where I sit, the writing is on the wall. I feel like I'm doing a book report on this, but this writing is so good.
So good.
I can't say it better than you, Michael Hebb. From where I sit, the writing is on the wall. It is time to face the inevitable, and we need a grassroots movement. We need to face our mortality as a village, not as isolated individuals. Funerals, law offices, and hospitals shouldn't be the only place we confront the passing of a loved one. The proper depth of this conversation can't happen when you feel intimidated, overwhelmed, and sad. It happens when you feel comfortable and are not staring down a crisis, which leads to his call to action, which is,
let's talk about death over dinner.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
He really wants to invite people to change the way that we all talk about death, one conversation at a time. And it could be over dinner, preferably, he says, something simple but good, not too fussy. It could be pizza from your favorite restaurant. It could be grilled cheeses and soup. It could be sharing beers on a folding chair on the porch. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
You know what I find interesting, and it's darker. I'm going to go, it's a little bit darker.
Take it darker.
But just, we're talking on a personal level and how it could affect our personal lives, our families' lives. But when you look at like the big picture, there are certain industries that benefit from us not talking about this. I think that if people became more aware, they would be enraged. Like anyone who's ever had a loved one in a nursing home or assisted living, if we all got more aware and more honest about what our end of lives might look like, what it might cost us just to die, what it might cost us to be cared for, the burdens we would leave each other, we would get enraged and say, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a better system, and one that doesn't just take advantage of old people, one that doesn't just like, okay, we'll vacuum out your bank account.
That's right. We'll park you in this facility while we drain down your health insurance.
Yes.
And once that's drained down, we're going to have to move you along.
We're done. And then on the flip side of like, I don't know how you feel about the, Dr. Kevorkian and all of the work around people having more agency in their own death. It's shocking what it takes to be able to decide, I think I'm good here. And I have made a conscious decision and I'm ready to go. And
death with dignity. Yeah,
exactly. And in our country, that's that's probably related to religion. It's very hard for a person to have that kind of dignity and be able to make those choices for themselves. Anyway, I just got myself riled up, but there's a lot of reasons for all of us to start talking about it.
Yeah. He really stresses that given the right framing, this quote, difficult, unquote, conversation does not need to be difficult. It can be liberating and transformative. It can bring us closer together, put us in touch with our humanity, remind us what really matters. It can leave us stronger and wiser and bolder than we were before. And these are his words, it can prepare us to have another conversation when crisis or a terminal diagnosis does arise that we weren't ready to have before.
Yeah.
And again, just want to say it again for anyone who wasn't paying attention the first time, the studies are clear. Open conversations with your family, doctors, and caregivers about your end-of-life wishes result in better care, less suffering, and a longer life.
Nice.
Michael Hebb reports this: conversations about death have even proved to make us funnier and more willing to laugh. So there's a spark for all you comedians and humorists and screenwriters and people who like laughing. If you want to be funnier or if you want to laugh more, be willing to lean in to real talk, whether it's about death or other things, that are sort of like taboo.
Nice.
So yeah, I thought it would be fun today to use a few of the instructions and prompts from Michael Hebb's book, Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner.
Okay.
It'll be a little more like Let's Talk About Death Over Podcasting Microphones, but you get the idea. And listeners, you can play along as you listen. And if anything comes up for you, write us at thesparkfile@gmail.com and let us know what sparked for you. So we're just skimming the surface. This book is rich and delicious, and I highly recommend it. If it speaks to you, give it a listen or read it. It is num num good. We'll just have a little fun. So starting with the invitation, Michael Hebb in the book provides a template for an email invitation that you can send out in case you are interested in having one of these discussions over a dinner. So I've customized it for my purposes today. It's addressed to Laura and it goes like this. Baby Cams, this might be the most unusual dinner or podcasting invitation I have ever sent, but bear with me. I think we are in for a remarkable experience. I would be honored if you would take the time to join me for dinner, aka podcasting, and engage in a conversation about death. This is not meant to be a morbid conversation, but instead a very human one where we consider what we want, both in life and during its closure. Through sharing our thoughts and feelings on this subject, we can more readily move through our fears, shed inhibitions, and forge a deeper understanding and connection with our loved ones. Sincerely, Susan. Cams, not to put you on the spot.
Where do I RSVP?
Do you accept my invitation or should we stop the recording now?
I accept. Count me in.
All right, let's do this. Okay, next step. Before we eat or continue podcasting, I would love it if we could each honor someone who is no longer with us, someone who has died, who had a positive impact on your life. Michael Hebb suggests you choose the first person who comes to mind. Don't edit. They're the first to your thoughts for a reason. Tell us their name, how they've impacted your life, and then we'll raise a glass in their honor. You're going to want to keep it to about a minute, and then we'll all want to dig into this food or continue podcasting. Laura Camion, who comes to mind for you?
Well, obviously, the very first thing that popped into my mind was my mom, Ruth Elaine Marcy. That's her maiden name.
Really?
Uh-huh. Yeah. My sister got my mom's maiden name as her first name.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And then have I ever told you that I was almost named Roberta?
No.
I was almost named Roberta after my dad because my sister had my mom's maiden name and my dad's last name combo. And then, so they were like, well, then I could be like Roberta Cami and I'd be called Bobby.
Oh,
Bobby. And I wouldn't have minded that because I love my dad.
That's very cute.
But so my mom, Ruth Elaine Marcy, and she had an incredible impact on me, both challenging and difficult and ultimately quite positive. I think she made me stronger. I think she made me see some generational pain. And I think that she helped to tee me up to be the person who would, one of the people who would break that chain and not carry it forward.
Nice.
I think she had high expectations for me. And although I questioned some of the ways she expressed her care and love for me, I think ultimately she did good. She did good.
Nice. I raise a glass.
I raise a glass to Ruthie.
To Ruthie.
Thank you, Suze.
My pleasure. All right, I'll go. The person who first jumped into my mind with this prompt is my dear departed friend, Ben Wackerman. I met Ben in college at Wright State University, and he was just a dear. He had already lived and worked in New York. He had interned with Tommy Tune. He had worked at a talent agency. He had worked on Grand Hotel, that musical Grand Hotel, and came to Wright State, and he just changed the course of my life. He's one of those people that he really believed in me. For y'all who are listening, he looked like a ginger Herbie the dentist elf from the Christmas special. And he was a very mischievous imp, very funny. And I learned so much from him. And I moved to New York in 1995, and about 2 weeks after I moved to New York, he died of AIDS. So I got
Oh,
to spend
Suze,
some
I'm
of his
sorry.
last days with him, and his ashes are scattered in front of the theater where Grand Hotel played on Broadway, which it's now got a new name. It's now the Hirschfeld. We scattered his ashes in front of the Hirschfeld there's like, you know how they plant trees in city sidewalks and there's a cut out with dirt. We surreptitiously in broad daylight, and you could get arrested for this,
Yes.
scattered his ashes there. So whenever I pass that theater.
Wow, you rebel, you. How
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh,
Ben Wackerman.
let's raise a glass to
Let's
Ben.
raise a glass to Ben Wackerman.
Oh, Ben.
So Sizebark, the way Michael Hebb has arranged this book is very cool. Each chapter is one of his suggested conversation prompts. And
for me, you mean like at the dinner? This is one of the prompts?
For at the dinner, each chapter is a prompt.
Oh, very cool.
I think this is very cool. We were talking in our Illume mastermind recently with a group member who's writing a book, and we were discussing what some of our favorite nonfiction books are and how they're structured.
Yes.
So, Kate, if you're listening to this podcast, the way this book is organized is really neat. So, as I said, each chapter title is a prompt for the dinner conversation, and then each chapter is an exploration of that prompt with stories that have come out of the hundreds of thousands of these dinners that Michael Hebb has moderated. It's a really, really cool book structure.
Wow, that's awesome.
So anyway, I thought I could just share just like maybe one or two of these prompts with you, Laura, and we could see what comes up for us. And again, you too, listener, I actually love this prompt. It is, what foods do you remember a departed loved one cooking for you?
Oh,
does that bring something up for you, Laura?
Yeah. My grandma would always make what I think is angel food cake, but when I was little, I called it sponge cake.
Yeah.
I think there is such a thing as sponge cake, but I was not calling it it wasn't this, but I called it sponge cake because it was like a sponge.
Yeah.
And everyone, when I was little, got such a kick out of that. And my grandma took it to mean that I loved sponge cake or / angel food cake. So she would make it every time. And she would be like, I'm making brownies for Scotty. I'm making sponge cake for Lulu. And, but then Susan, the thing was like, I didn't really love it that much, but I would have to have a big old slice of it because she made it for me. But I would be looking at Scotty's brownies and I'd be like, I really would like a brownie, but no, I'm having the sponge cake / angel food cake.
That is amazing. And it reminds me of a tangent story that I heard one time. I can't remember where I heard this, but a woman who somewhere along the line, her mother-in-law got it in her head that this woman loved ducks and kept gifting her all over the years, all this duck shit. And she was just stuck didn't correct her early. And you were a little kid. So it's like, you're just like, I'm going to eat sponge cake.
I had no idea. I didn't even have the words. I didn't know. I just knew that I had to have the sponge cake.
That is an amazing story.
But I always the takeaway was like that I watched my grandma really, truly try to make the things that she thought other people liked, which was such a beautiful and wonderful quality. Like it was so sweet of her to be that mindful of like what the meal prep was going to be like what she believed everybody really wanted.
I love that. I love that.
Super, super sweet.
Mine is like, it's so funny because it's not my memory. It's my father's memory, but it's the thing that jumps to my mind. So I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
My dad, for years, my entire life, has talked about how when he was little, when he was sick, his mom would make him coddled eggs.
Wow.
And I think a coddled egg is, I could be wrong about this, but I looked it up once, and I think it is where you boil water, almost like a poached egg. You boil water and you crack the egg, put it in the water. So you pull it out and it's just like warm and runny, and you could eat it with toast. And my dad talks about how much he loved those coddled eggs that his mom would make for him when he was sick, which I always translated that into, he could really recognize her love in that little meal that he would have when he wasn't feeling well.
That is so sweet.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really sweet.
It's not even mine. It's my dad's, but
It's so
yeah.
nice. And as someone who, I did not really learn to cook. And part of that was by design, I think, with my mom, because she was very hell bent that this is her skewed view. I'm not saying this is true, but she did not want us to grow up to like cook and clean for someone else. Just keep in mind, her life was, she was pregnant and had her first child at 19. So, and she was in college to graduate as an art major. And she relinquished all of that to start, cooking and cleaning and raising babies. And it was very much a part of like the feminist movement and women trying to be employed and stuff. So I just just for context, it's like she wasn't an asshole. She came by all that naturally. And of course, as I got older, I realized like, gosh, it really would be nice to cook if for no one else but myself, like to be able to cook. And it's such a creative act.
Yeah.
It's not something that you need to feel resentful of doing for others. You can do it with love. And I didn't really learn that I didn't learn that so much until Wes Day, because when we were courting, Wes would please.
How old are you?
I'm ancient.
So sweet. Ancient. I love that word.
I love it. When he was my gentleman caller, he would make like pork chops. He would make risotto. He would make things that I'm like, what the heck? I wouldn't know the first thing about how to make this. And he just did. And that's when I learned, kind of those love languages. Cooking was cooking for a loved one is one of his love languages.
I love that. I'm going to hit you with one more prompt. What would you want people to say about you at your funeral?
Oh, geez.
What would you want people to say about you at your funeral? I have to say, I love this prompt because I feel like it gives people an opportunity to check in and
track?
See if they are creating, are they creating a life and conducting themselves in a way that aligns with what they would want people to say about them at a memorial? I think this is a great prompt.
I think it's an amazing prompt. I don't think it's necessarily easy to answer, but I think it is amazing because it bumps up against a lot of things of like, who do you think you are?
Okay, if you were going to just be bold and brash as you ask our clients to be, if you were going to brag on yourself.
I was not saying like I'm going to be able to answer it just fine. I'm just saying it's not like an easy answer for people. I just wanted to acknowledge that. But for me, so I would say I would love for people to say she laughed a whole lot.
Oh.
And she made others laugh.
Oh.
I would love for them to say that I cared about other people. And by learning this is not something I've always done, but by learning how to live my best life, I inspired others to live their best life.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I would really want that.
That's awesome.
Whoo! How about you, Susie Q?
Laura, I agree with you. I think it's tough, but for me, I've said this before to you, I kind of don't give that much of a shit about legacy, like leaving behind like a great monument of art.
Right.
I care more about strong, healthy, loving human connection.
Yes.
So my hope is that people would say something along the lines of that they felt loved and they loved in return, like because I existed, that exchange occurred.
The greatest thing you can ever learn is how to love and be loved in return.
That's what the poets say.
So, Suze, by you learning how to love and be loved, you are teaching others how to love and be loved.
I think I would also love for people, for somebody who just said legacy I don't care about it. I think I love the idea of people because of the work that we have done, which I really do feel like is
oh my gosh,
like life's work. that they would be able to say, look at all the things that we have created, that their creativity and self-expression had been freed.
That's right. Unlocked and given permission. That's right.
So I care less about mine, honestly, than I do about like that other people's lives were bettered and improved by knowing me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're on track. I think
you're
right on track.
I'll keep working on it. I'm going to keep working on it. I think you're on track too.
Thank you.
So there are so many good prompts, like so many more than you could ever talk about in a single dinner. But it's fun to get to kind of curate.
So good.
Oh, so good.
We could probably talk for 6 hours and then drag ourselves off the phone, and then tomorrow be like, I'm leaving you this Marco Polo because I've been thinking about
Yeah. I'll just offer you this. Michael Hebb stresses that how we end the conversation about death is critical, regardless of whether we're at a beautiful table or driving on the interstate.
Oh.
He says, I end each dinner with admiration for the living, called an appreciation in the round. To initiate the appreciation, someone shares something they appreciate about the person directly on their right or left. And when you are being appreciated, your only job is to receive what is being said. The trick is to take it in, not deflect it, not appreciate them back, just say thank you. And then turn to the person next to you, reach down inside yourself and say something that you truly admire about them. Cams, may I appreciate you for a moment?
Listen, just a few episodes back, I sat and you appreciated me so much.
Do you want to appreciate me?
No, I still want you to appreciate me.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I just want to acknowledge I've had a wealth of being appreciated, and I'm grateful for it. But
well, let me give you another spoonful of appreciation.
Okay.
I appreciate that you were willing to have a conversation that for many people would be very tender or taboo, to have it on mic with the knowledge that it's going to be consumed by people that aren't us, not in the privacy of our own home at our own table. But I just want to thank you for being so game and so honest and for going there as you always do.
Oh, Suze. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm supposed to say, and I will say it. Thank you. Now I get to give you some gratitude.
Yeah.
I appreciate these deep conversations with you, and I appreciate how before this podcast even began, years and years and years ago, I had the opportunity to just learn from you about engaging in difficult conversations and staying present and listening to a person who needed to share difficult feelings. And I just feel like I have learned so much from you, and I'm grateful for it every day.
Thank you, Laura Camion.
I love you.
I love you too. So what do we make of it? What do we make of it? Here's a few what do we make of it.
Okay.
As a moderator, these prompts are just mwah. Michael Hebb has really put in the time. They are burnished. They have been tested. They are great conversation prompts, but they're also great writing or journaling prompts.
Ooh.
So if you're a moderator, a teacher, a dinner host, like these are great prompts. And the flow of the gatherings that Michael Hebb is proposing is giving me Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering
Yes.
vibes. So thoughtful.
God. I was going to say that earlier. The closure. Yes. Yeah.
So good. The writing of this book, what do we make of it? If you're Michael Hebb, you make this book. It is, again, so well researched. The writing is so lovely. The way it's ordered and structured is a real spark. A personal what do we make of it is, one, I'd really like to host one of these dinners.
Yes,
please.
Yes, please.
Would you like to come to the dinner?
Mm-hmm. I would. Please come.
And two, I think I'm going to reach back to my dad and see if he'd like to talk through some of these prompts with me, maybe over Zoom so that we don't have to wait until the next time I travel to see him.
I think that's wonderful.
I feel like these prompts are gentle and they will give us a great departure point for these questions that I have for him. Like, I'm genuinely curious to know, would he say coddled eggs, or would he have a different answer that surprises me?
Oh,
And a longer form, what do we make of this, is I think for myself, I will be sparked by these conversations in so many different ways. I feel like a lot of sparks are going to shake out of these conversations.
yeah.
Cleaning up outstanding issues in relationships,
Yep.
cleaning up my financial and legal affairs, thinking about how I want to spend whatever remaining time I have, what I want to make, who I want to make laugh. Like,
Yes.
so many, what do we make of it?
Cleaning up my files.
Cleaning it up so you feel good about whoever has to go through that shit.
Yes, I love like all of this. I think it's all so juicy for creative expression, all of it. Like you said, starting with thinking about it, talking about it, journaling about it, et cetera, et cetera. And it just like makes me think about characters. I'm always thinking about characters, but things, people who refuse to talk about death even when it is imminent.
Yeah.
People who only talk about death, who are like, you get the Addams family, right?
Yeah.
You get Morticia.
Yeah.
You get like,
Yeah.
So you push it to the extremes, in all kinds of ways. And I just think strangely, we can relate to all of it.
Yeah. I feel like I temper myself not to be a total Morticia. I limit myself to one episode of the podcast per season where I just go ham on talking about death. I do that.
You have really shown some self-restraint, and I'm impressed.
I think it's one of the most important things we can talk about. I really do.
I really do too. I love it, and I'm so grateful.
I want to conclude this spark with these words from Michael Hebb. If you don't talk about what you want at the end, then you can be sure that you won't get what you want. Picture what you want your final days to be like. Who is around you? Are you in a hospital? Will there be a funeral? And if so, what music is playing and who is speaking? What happens to your body? How do you want to be remembered? Telling your wishes to your friends and family will give them more than the ability to honor you. It will give them the peace of mind to properly grieve you without the weight of doubt and guilt. If we take ownership over our lives and eventual deaths, we can allow others to be powerfully present to our passing and not let it be lost in the chaos of indecision. If doctors and nurses had clear direction from each of us, advanced care directives, clear power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and if our families know our wishes for the type of care we want at our life's end, if they knew what we want to have happen to our body and how we want to be celebrated, the emotional and financial burden would significantly reduce. Please don't mistake my optimism for delusion. I know how hard this terrain is. I know it is not a well-lit path, and yet I believe that every person has the ability to step into these canyons. It is just about how and when, and I hope this book serves as a trail guide.
Oh,
Michael Hebb, friends.
Well done, Michael Hebb.
Michael Hebb. So beautiful, this book. So beautiful.
Oh my gosh. What a beautiful, beautiful sentiment.
Thank you for that, Michael Hebb. That's
I'm
it.
grateful. I'm getting that book. I'm going to take it down to Florida when I see my dad. Yeah.
I'm going to send that book to my dad. I'm going to invite him to have these conversations. I'm going to invite you to a dinner, Laura Camion. Maybe we'll have lasagna. It'll be delicious. And I think that's it. This episode of the Spark File was made on the lands of the Lenape people. And as always, we hope that it put another bunch of sparks in your file. If there's a spark that you'd like us to explore, or if you'd like to learn more about how to coach with us to bring your creative ideas to life, email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you got to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
You can follow us on social at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. It really, really does help other listeners to find us. Also, if you like this podcast, we hope you'll share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, we hope that you are buried in a silk-lined mahogany coffin with gold detailing. What a weird curse to put on somebody.
Oh my Lord.
They're like, that's exactly what I wanted.
That's what I wanted. Hey, if something lights you up and gets your creative sparks flying, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that has been knocking at your door. It's your turn to please take that spark and fan it into a flame.
You know, you got to take it
And make it.
And talk about death over
And
dinner.
talk about death over dinner.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.